Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching Al Arabiya News. These are our top stories. President Trump meets with Jordan's King Abdullah, imploring him to take in Palestinian refugees as part of the US Gaza takeover plan. It comes as Trump promises all hell will break out with Hamas if all the Israeli hostages are not returned by this weekend. A 25% raise on steel and aluminium imports escalates fears of a trade war as the EU says it will respond with firm and proportionate countermeasures. And US Vice President J.D. Vance marks his first foreign trip to the Paris AI Summit as he challenges Europe's approach to artificial intelligence. To our top story, and in the last hour, US President Donald Trump has sat down with Jordan's King Abdullah at the White House to discuss his plans to relocate Gaza's refugees. It's believed Trump could withhold aid to Jordan and Egypt if the two nations do not oblige to his takeover plans. Currently, Jordan receives around $1.45 billion a year in US military and economic support, making them the top recipients of aid in the Middle East. We can now speak to the former Jordanian minister, Hussein Majali. Good evening, Mr. Majali, and thank you so much for joining me. Much appreciated. Details are still emerging from this meeting, which is taking place in Washington. Can you give us your initial thoughts on the discussions that could possibly be underway?
Good evening to you and to all your viewers. First of all, as you've stated, it's an ongoing meeting now. Nothing has yet come out of the meeting, but the Jordanian position that His Majesty holds on behalf of Jordan and the Arab community as a whole, that there is no possible way at all to accept any Palestinian that has been uprooted from Gaza or the West Bank to any Arab country, let alone Jordan. The question is not accepting or not accepting. The question is uprooting people of their own country, of their own soil. This is unheard of. There are no international convention, no an international law that allows that. There is nothing, no United Nations agreement accepts such a thing. This is as bad as genocide, and Jordan has its stand regarding this. And I know the U.S. administration has, as you've stated, the economic aid and the military aid and all that, but also Jordan, has a very strong relationship with the United States, not only with the administration, with Congress, with the Senate, with think tanks, with all major influencers in the United States. His Majesty is highly regarded there. And I really believe that His Majesty is the most qualified to speak on behalf of the Arab community, because he's right in the middle of this turmoil in the area. It has really caused a turmoil. This is unheard of, completely unheard of to date throughout the inception of humanity. Unheard of, to uproot people and push them away from their soil.
As you say, this is unheard of.
Please, go ahead.
It could be seen as genocide. What are your main concerns if something like this does go ahead and Donald Trump does put pressure on? What would this mean for the Palestinian people? But will it uproot Jordan, and will it destabilize the country possibly?
Well, most definitely we are not worried about destabilizing Jordan. Jordan is a very strong founded nation based on rule of law, constitution, and we've been We've been around for thousands and thousands of years, and as a kingdom for 102 years, 103 years, sorry. So there is no worry about destabilization. What we worry about, what will become of the Palestinians? The statements that the President of the United States have stated are extremely horrifying. That if they don't do this, hell will break loose. And very unfortunate that Israel is supporting all that. This is a country that in the International Court of Justice, there are 3 proceedings. 2 have done. One is going on in the proceeding that accuses it of genocide. The ICC have put its ex-defense minister and its current prime minister on the arrest list. And it seems that whenever comes to any nation in the world, international law applies. Only when it comes to the Palestinians, international law does not exist. This is a duty of all the world, not only His Majesty and Jordan and the Arab world. It's the moral responsibility of all humanity to stop such idiotic actions.
As you say, it is a moral responsibility, but tell us about the relationship between Jordan and the US. Really, they have been long-time allies, but could refusing Donald Trump's demand trigger a diplomatic crisis? It's a very fine line to tread at the moment.
Ma'am, I will tell you something. The relationship between Jordan and the United States at a governmental level, at a leadership level, at people's level is stronger than to be shaken by anything. We have an excellent relationship, and I am sure it will stay excellent relationship. The American people are good people. They are not bad people. They are really excellent people. I don't believe at all that we will see something like that. There might be a bump here, a bump there. Our cooperation is immense. We have military intelligence on security affairs such as drugs, counter drugs, human trafficking. We have a vast array of arrangement. Mind you about the special relationship strategic between Jordan and the United States. This will never be stabilized. This will never be shaken because there are 2 nations behind it. It's not only 4 people or 2 people or 1 person.
Hussein Majali, former Jordanian minister, thank you so much for your time this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yesterday, President Trump told reporters the Gaza ceasefire should be cancelled and all hell would break out if Hamas did not release all the Israeli hostages by noon on Saturday. Here's a reminder of just what he had to say.
Well, I would say this, and I'm going to let that because that's Israel's decision, but as far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. And after that, I would say all hell is going to break out. And I don't think they're going to do it. I think a lot of them are dead. I think a lot of the hostages are dead. I think it's a great human tragedy.
We can now go live to Herzliya, just north of Tel Aviv, to speak to author and Middle East correspondent Jotam Confino. Jotam, thank you so much for joining me. I was just speaking to a former Jordanian minister there, and he's heavily criticised Trump's plans, obviously, to move people from the Gaza Strip into Jordan. What's been the reaction from what we've heard from Donald Trump where you are in Israel?
So I can tell you that the Israeli Security Cabinet just finished a 4.5-hour meeting where they were discussing specifically Donald Trump's Gaza plan, but also Donald Trump's threat to let all hell break out if all of the hostages aren't released by Saturday. And my understanding, according to the sources that I speak to, is that the Security Cabinet is in agreement with Donald Trump. And they also say that the remaining hostages have to come out by Saturday. I'm not really understanding fully if they mean all of the living hostages in this first phase or also those who are dead. That's not really clear from the information I'm getting. But they're also saying that the negotiations over the implementation of phase 2 has now been stopped because Hamas is violating the ceasefire by delaying the release of the hostages. So that part of the negotiation has now been frozen, according to my sources.
OK, so the ceasefire is obviously fragile and we are not sure what's going to happen going forward. But let's just go back to Jordan's king. He's currently in the US now meeting President Donald Trump. What can we expect from that? And what more, could happen with aid to Jordan too?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand how important the relationship is for Jordan, especially between Amman and Washington. Amman receives $1.3 billion a year in aid from the United States, and that's expected to rise to over $2 billion a year. And in addition to that, Jordan is buying a lot of military equipment from the United States, including F-16 fighter jets, and they're also getting help with securing their border crossings. So this is really, really important for Jordan to continue to please Donald Trump. But of course, the king is not going to allow Donald Trump to deport 1 million or even 2 million Palestinians from Gaza to Jordan. That's not going to happen. Jordan is not for sale in that sense. So he really has a very difficult task ahead of him tonight when he speaks to Donald Trump to try and figure out if there's some wiggle room, some way they can meet on the middle, because currently they're miles apart. Jordan has already said they will not agree to any Palestinian refugees from Gaza. And Donald Trump has said, well, you have to, otherwise I'm going to probably take your aid.
Yes, a tricky balance for them to both strike during those talks. But Jotam, where does all of this leave the already really fragile ceasefire deal? And it could be a real concern for people whose loved ones are still hostages being held by Hamas.
It really all comes down to Hamas wanting to play psychological games. That's the only way to see this, because Hamas is claiming that Israel is violating the ceasefire agreement on several different ways, including halting aid and delaying having Palestinians from southern Gaza going back to northern Gaza. Now, those two things are not true. First of all, the reason why Israel delayed the moving of Palestinians from southern Gaza to northern Gaza was because Hamas violated the ceasefire by not releasing civilian women before releasing civilian female soldiers. And secondly, aid is coming into Gaza. More than 12,000 trucks with humanitarian aid has come into Gaza in the past 3 weeks alone. So Hamas is now really trying to play games here. They're trying to see how much they can push and terrorize Israel, but they're playing with fire. I really think they are, because they are technically giving Netanyahu and his government a way out to say, well, Hamas is breaking the ceasefire, and we have Donald Trump's backing now to let hell loose, and that is really dangerous.
Yes, indeed. Jotam Confino, author and Middle East correspondent in Herzliya. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you.
The Canadian government says it will retaliate a clear and collaborative way to the latest tariffs announced by President Trump after he confirmed he is imposing a 25% import tax on steel and aluminium entering the US from the 12th of March. Canada is the top exporter of both metals to the US, but Trump believes these policies will help protect jobs and industries stateside, even if it raises prices for the ordinary Americans. Benji Haya has this report.
That'll be it.
Donald Trump, at the swipe of a pen, once again inflicting sweeping changes on the US economy and that of its rivals and allies.
It's 25% without exceptions or exemptions, and that's all countries, no matter where it comes from, all countries. If made in the United States, however, United States of America, there is no tariff, zero. So if it's made in the United States, there is no tariff. All you have to do is make it in the United States. We don't need it from another country.
Amongst the hardest hit, America's neighbour to the north. Canada exports over the border 6 million tonnes of steel products and more than 3 million tonnes of aluminium products per year. That's more than every other country combined.
Imports of Canadian steel and aluminum create thousands, if not millions, of jobs and support families across the United States. We have been doing things together in an extraordinarily integrated way for many, many years, and we will look to continue to work with our closest ally and partner. We should be doing more together, not fighting with each other, but Canadians will stand up strongly and firmly if we need to.
But that's not all. The US president also promised a new package of reciprocal tariffs that would be unveiled this week. Not just metals. These could apply to any product.
We don't want it to hurt other countries, but they've been taking advantage of us for years and years and years, and they've charged us tariffs. Most of them have charged us, almost every one, I would say, almost without exception. Definitely. They've charged us and we haven't charged them. And it's time to be reciprocal. So you'll be hearing that word a lot, reciprocal. If they charge us, we charge them. If they're at 25, we're at 25. If they're at 10, we're at 10. And if they're much higher than 25, that's what we are too. So that's having to do with everything. That's not just steel and aluminum.
We deeply regret these decisions and announcements. The EU sees no justification for the imposition of tariffs on our exports, which is economically counterproductive, especially given the deeply integrated production chains established through our extensive transatlantic trade and investment ties. Tariffs are taxes, bad for businesses, worse for consumers.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. This is the beginning of making America rich again.
But it seems no nation, friend or foe, is immune from the White House's tariff tactics, and the trade wars show no signs of abating. Benji Haya, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Moscow and Kyiv have attacked one another's energy infrastructures overnight, sparking an alleged fire at a Russian oil refinery and power restrictions in Ukraine. 9 towns and villages in the eastern Poltava region were disconnected from gas supplies. It comes ahead of meetings between the US and Ukraine to end the 3-year war. Now, President Trump has announced the reintroduction of plastic straws after the last US government attempted to phase out the use of single-use plastics. Trump told White House reporters that paper straws don't work, and he signed the executive order. Assisted dying cases in the United Kingdom may not need to be signed off by a High Court judge, according to a new bill that's been proposed. Labour MP Kim Leadbeater, who spearheaded the original campaign, has suggested a panel of experts would examine each case individually and then decide whether permission is granted to allow assisted death. And Google has officially changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America for those using the platform inside the US. It follows an executive order by President Trump. Anyone outside of the United States will actually see both names. It's day one of a new job for Lord Peter Mandelson today, who starts his stint as a UK ambassador to the US. Lord Mandelson has said the United Kingdom wouldn't necessarily agree with every detail of President Trump's agenda, but it was important to have a strong and clear mandate for change. Here's what he had to say about his new role.
I'm speaking to you from the ambassador's residence, a building that symbolizes decades of friendship, hosting countless presidents, prime ministers, politicians, royalty, and many ordinary American citizens. I'm crystal clear. The UK has no closer ally than America. Looking ahead, President Trump's administration is shaping up to be one of the most consequential periods in modern America.
Ollie Barrett has a reaction from London.
Well, Peter Mandelson certainly knows that he has his work cut out. He's been giving a series of interviews, many of them to American media, to try and make the case directly to some of those people in the Trump administration who might have had concerns about him in this role, and also some concerns about previous comments that he's made. He has said that he now feels he was ill-judged and wrong with some of the ways he previously described Donald Trump before he became the UK ambassador to the United States. He had previously described him as a bully and a danger to the world, but now he spends a lot of his time in these interviews referencing that mandate that he says President Trump has secured and that must be respected. Now, Peter Mandelson will certainly be trying to foster personal connections and relationships. He knows that they are very important when it comes to dealing with Donald Trump and the people around him. We've seen all sorts of concern here in the UK about tariffs, for example. Lord Mandelson says that there is a case to be made that the UK can maybe avoid some of the tariffs that are being meted out to other countries. He has been making the case, as have other government officials and ministers, that the UK, when it comes to the trade in goods between the UK and the US, is actually not in deficit in the way that many other countries around the world are. And that is a case that they will continue to try and make, and you would expect will be a key part of Lord Mandelson's stint, certainly in the early days of his time as the UK ambassador. We also know that he will be considering exactly how he can foster further meetings between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. They have spoken several times on the phone recently, but Downing Street not giving us any timeline for when Keir Starmer might visit the United States. But we also know that Donald Trump is very fond of the UK's royal family. So Peter Mandelson will be involved in working out exactly how the UK's royals can be deployed for positive effect on the UK-US relationship. But it will be a difficult task for Lord Mandelson as the new US ambassador, not least because of the unpredictable way that Donald Trump sometimes operates as president. Peter Mandelson will be well aware that at any time of day or night, Donald Trump may take himself to social media platforms, may give an interview, may talk in the Oval Office and set out policy changes that could have a huge impact on the UK, that Lord Mandelson and his colleagues and the government here in London may well have to react to. So as I say, Lord Mandelson will be very clear in this new post that he has a difficult job on his hands, but he insists that he can boost the UK-US relationship, particularly at a time when Keir Starmer and Donald Trump up to now seem to have been getting on very well, with Donald Trump making some positive personal comments about that particular relationship, and Lord Mandelson will be hoping that that's exactly the kind of thing he can encourage in his new post.
Ollie Barrett in London there. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at the top business news. Luxury group Kering's fourth quarter sales were hit by a continued slump at its main brand Gucci. However, a slight improvement in the group's performance in China and the US is buoying investors. Shares in the French group jumped 5% in early trade as investors seized on hope the company had reached an inflection point. A group led by Elon Musk has made a $97.4 billion bid to buy OpenAI just months after he sued the AI startup. Elon Musk co-founded OpenAI but later fell out with his colleague and the current CEO, Sam Altman, before the company released ChatGPT in 2022. In reply, Altman posted on X, "No thank you, but we will buy Twitter for $9.74 $4 billion if you want. Turning to the sports news now. And the former vice president of UEFA, Luis Rubiales, has told a judge that Spanish player Jenny Hermoso gave him consent for a kiss after the 2023 Women's World Cup. The former Spanish Football Federation president did testify in court today after being accused of sexual assault and coercion for allegedly trying to downplay the kiss. Elsewhere, Hermoso testified that she felt disrespected by Rubiales after winning the World Cup. Rugby legend Warren Gatland is set to leave his role as Wales head coach after a record 14 successive Test match defeats. Gatland is contracted until the 2027 World Cup, but is he now set to leave during the Six Nations tournament? Cardiff's Matt Sherratt takes over for the rest of the competition. And the funeral of former Manchester United player Denis Law has taken place in his adopted city today. Ex-players like Ruud van Nistelrooy, Gary Neville and Brian Robson and legendary manager Sir Alex Ferguson attended Manchester Cathedral to pay their respects to the former Scottish striker who had been battling dementia, passing away at the age of 84. Now, US Vice President J.D. Vance was in Paris today for the final day of the AI summit. In his first foreign trip since taking office, Vance delivered a speech on Europe's approach to artificial intelligence and how it moderates its content on big tech platforms. Also in attendance were European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who launched Invest AI, an initiative to mobilise €200 million for investment in AI, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who spoke about the need to invest in reskilling people for an AI-driven future. Our correspondent Ross Cullen is in Paris, where the conference has been taking place. Ross, good evening to you. Thank you for joining me. J.D. Vance says Europeans risk killing AI with their red tape. What were the main takeaways from his speech, and what were the main challenges that he did reference?
Good evening, Leigh Ann, here from Paris, where J.D. Vance has been speaking this afternoon. He met Emmanuel Macron, the French president, for one-on-one talks. But before that, he gave a speech at the AI conference, which has been taking place in the Grand Palais. You might be able to see it behind me, one of the most beautiful buildings in the centre of the French capital. He said that, quote, excessive regulation of the AI sector could kill a transformative sector just as it's taking off. He said that AI systems developed in America will be free from ideological bias, and he went on to criticize countries that would potentially use AI for what he said was, quote, authoritarian censorship, saying that the American idea of AI is that it can be a vehicle for free speech. There was no doubt about his speech, though, wanting to make sure that America, the United States, is centered as the #1 place for AI development, saying we're willing to work with other countries, but the home of big tech, the home of little tech, will be in the United States. It was also a chance for many of the European leaders here, many of the world leaders who've been attending the AI Action Summit, to meet Mr. Vance for the first time. The 40-year-old, on his first trip overseas since the inauguration last month, had one-on-one bilateral meetings with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, along with meeting Emmanuel Macron a bit earlier.
Ross, the US and the UK did not sign the summit communique. Do we know why they decided to not do this, like other major countries, which include China, India, Japan, Australia, and also Canada?
Yeah, so on Monday we had these rumours when the declaration was starting to be drawn up that the United Kingdom and the United States might be backing out of signing that joint communique. Now, the United Kingdom didn't send the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. They did send their Technology Minister, Peter Kyle, and he said that the United Kingdom wouldn't sign up to any agreement that wasn't 100% in Britain's own interests. And if you were reading between the lines of JD Vance's speech here to the AI Action Summit, when he was criticising, railing against excessive regulation, excessive regulatory frameworks being put in place, you can understand perhaps the United States not signing up to that declaration, especially if you view that in the wider context of the Trump administration starting to withdraw from many international institutions and international agreements, such as the World Health Organization and the 2015 Climate Accord signed here in Paris.
Ross, Elon Musk isn't even there, but he's been making headlines due to his feud with his former old friend, Sam Altman. In 30 seconds, just wrap up exactly what's been happening between the two of them.
Well, Sam Altman has just been at one of the key startup events just in the east of Paris in the last couple of hours alongside Emmanuel Macron. And we woke up this morning to that enormous bid, the nearly $100 billion bid from this group of investors, including Elon Musk, to buy OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT. Sam Altman, the current head of OpenAI, replied on Twitter with a post on X saying that, well, I'm not interested in you buying OpenAI, but I will happily buy X from you, Elon Musk, for $10 billion, to which Elon Musk himself replied on X saying, you're a swindler.
Ross Cullen, I shouldn't giggle, but yes, that was the chat between the two friends on X, which was known as Twitter once. Ross Cullen in Paris, thank you so much. And a reminder of our top stories. President Trump meets with Jordan's King Abdullah, imploring him to take in Palestinian refugees as part of the US Gaza takeover plan. It comes as Trump promises all hell will break out with Hamas if all Israeli hostages are not returned by this weekend. A 25% raise on steel and aluminium imports escalates fears of a trade war as the EU says it will respond with firm and proportionate countermeasures. And US Vice President JD Vance marks his first foreign trip to the Paris AI Summit as he challenges Europe's approach to artificial intelligence. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. The Dressing Room is coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burgess Watson with GNT. Good night and thank you for watching.